The crack of a rifle shot echoed across the dusty main street of Redemption, Texas, and Jack Malone's hand froze halfway to his whiskey glass as he watched the most magnificent woman he had ever seen level a Winchester at three drunk ranch hands who had cornered her outside the general store. It was August 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small cattle town. But Jack barely noticed the heat as he stood from his table outside the saloon, his gray eyes fixed on the scene unfolding 50 yards away. The woman stood with her back straight, her dark auburn hair pinned up beneath a simple bonnet, her calico dress dusty from travel. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, he guessed, and the way she held that rifle told him she knew exactly how to use it. "I will say this one time, gentlemen," her voice carried clear across the street, steady as stone. "You will step aside and let me pass, or the next shot will not be aimed at the dirt near your boots." The largest of the three men, a brute named Carson who worked for the Triple Bar Ranch, laughed and took a step forward. "Now, sweetheart, we were just being friendly. No need to get all riled up." Jack was already moving, his boots kicking up dust as he crossed the street, but he slowed when he saw the woman's finger tighten on the trigger. She fired again, this time close enough to Carson's left boot that the man yelped and jumped back, his face going red with anger and embarrassment. "The lady asked you to move," Jack said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. His hand rested casually on the Colt at his hip, and the three men turned to see who had spoken. Recognition dawned on their faces. Jack Malone had a reputation in these parts as a fair man, but not one to cross. He had worked as a ranch hand, a trail guide, and occasionally helped the sheriff when trouble came to town. At 26, he had already lived more life than most men twice his age. Carson spat in the dirt. "This ain't your concern, Malone." "I am making it my concern," Jack replied, taking another step forward. "Now, you boys have had your fun. Time to move along before this gets uglier than it needs to be." The woman's green eyes flicked to Jack for just a moment, assessing him with the same careful attention she had given the three men. He saw intelligence there, and fire, and something else he could not quite name. Whatever it was, it made his heart beat faster in his chest. The standoff lasted another tense moment before Carson finally growled and gestured to his companions. "Come on, this town's getting too prissy anyway." They stalked off toward the saloon on the far end of town, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Jack turned his full attention to the woman who had lowered her rifle but had not holstered it. Up close, she was even more striking than he had thought. Her face was sun-touched, with a sprinkling of freckles across her nose, and her eyes held both wariness and determination. "Thank you for your assistance," she said formally, though her voice had softened slightly. "Though I had the situation well in hand." "I could see that," Jack said, allowing himself a small smile. "That was some fine shooting." "Not many people can put a bullet that close to a target without actually hitting it." "My father taught me," she said, and a flicker of sadness crossed her face. "He said a woman traveling alone needed to know how to defend herself." "Wise man," Jack said. He removed his hat, holding it against his chest. "Jack Malone, at your service, and you are," she hesitated, then seemed to decide he had earned at least that much. "Catherine Hartley. I have just arrived from St. Louis. My uncle owns the newspaper here in town. Silas Hartley." Jack's eyebrows rose. The newspaper editor was a respected man in Redemption, though he kept mostly to himself. "I did not know he had family back east." "He does not speak of us much," Catherine said, her tone suggesting there was a story there. "But when my father passed 6 months ago, Uncle Silas wrote and offered me a position helping with the newspaper. I took the train as far as Austin and then hired a wagon to bring me the rest of the way. I arrived not 20 minutes ago." "And already had to defend yourself," Jack said, shaking his head. "I apologize for our town's poor welcome. Most folks here are decent, but you will always find a few who do not know how to behave around a lady." Catherine's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. I have encountered worse in St. Louis, Mr. Malone. At least here the threats are honest and straightforward. Jack found himself grinning. This woman had steel in her spine and wit to match. He gestured toward the newspaper office, which sat between the general store and the barber shop. May I help you with your bags? Your uncle's place is just there. She studied him again with those sharp green eyes, and Jack had the distinct feeling she was seeing right through to his soul. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she nodded. That would be kind of you. My trunk is still in the wagon. As Jack hefted her heavy trunk onto his shoulder, a task that required considerable effort despite his rangy strength, Catherine walked beside him carrying her rifle and a smaller carpet bag. People on the street watched them pass with open curiosity. News traveled fast in a small town, and by evening, everyone in Redemption would know about the new arrival who had faced down 3 ranch hands with a Winchester. Silas Hartley emerged from his newspaper office as they approached, a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers. His face lit up when he saw Catherine. "Niece, you are here at last. I was beginning to worry when the afternoon coach passed without you." "I hired a private wagon, Uncle," Catherine said, and Jack watched as the older man embraced her warmly. "I hope that was not too presumptuous." Not at all," Silas said, pulling back to look at her properly. His eyes were damp. "You look so much like your mother, child." "She was my favorite sister, you know." Then he seemed to notice Jack for the first time. "Malone, good to see you. Have you already met my Catherine?" In a manner of speaking, Jack said, setting the trunk down carefully. "She had a bit of trouble with some of the Triple Bar boys." "She handled it admirably." Silas's face darkened. "Carson and his ilk, I would wager. They have been causing trouble in town for weeks. The sheriff is too old to manage them properly." He turned to Catherine, concern etched in his features. "Are you all right?" "Perfectly fine, Uncle," Catherine assured him, though Mr. Malone's intervention was appreciated. Jack found himself reluctant to leave, even though his task was complete. "If you need anything else, Miss Hartley, I am usually at the Rockingham Ranch just west of town. Or you can leave word at the saloon." "The Rockingham?" Silas perked up. "I did not know you were working for Marcus again." "Just started last week," Jack confirmed, "helping with the fall roundup." He turned his attention back to Catherine, noting the way the late afternoon sun caught the red highlights in her hair. "Welcome to Redemption, Miss Hartley. I hope your stay here is more peaceful than your arrival." "Thank you, Mr. Malone," she said, and this time her smile was genuine and warm. It transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful, and Jack felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening onto a room he had not known existed. As he walked back toward the saloon to retrieve his horse, Jack's mind kept returning to the image of Catherine Hartley standing firm with that rifle, unshaken by 3 men who outweighed her and outnumbered her. He had known plenty of brave people in his time, but there was something different about her. She had not been reckless or foolhardy. She had simply known her worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. By the time he reached his horse, a sturdy paint gelding named Biscuit, Jack had made a decision that surprised even himself. Someday, if he was very lucky and worked very hard to prove himself worthy, that woman would be his wife. The thought should have terrified him. Jack had never been one to think much about marriage or settling down. His life had been about movement, about the next job or the next town. But watching Catherine defend herself with such calm determination had shown him something he had not realized he was searching for: a partner who could stand beside him, not behind him. The weeks that followed proved Jack right about Catherine's character in every way. She threw herself into working at the newspaper, writing articles about town events and helping her uncle with the printing press. But more than that, she made herself a part of Redemption in ways that surprised everyone. When Mrs. Henderson's barn caught fire, Catherine was one of the first people there with buckets, her skirts hitched up and her face streaked with soot. When the schoolteacher fell ill with influenza, Catherine volunteered to teach the children for 2 weeks. despite having no formal training. And when a family of freed slaves arrived in town looking for work and a place to settle, facing hostility from some of the more narrow-minded residents, Catherine wrote a powerful editorial in the newspaper about justice and human dignity that changed more than a few minds. Jack found reasons to come into town more often than was strictly necessary. He would stop by the newspaper office with some small excuse, a question about an advertisement for the ranch or news he thought Silas might want to know. Catherine always greeted him with that same assessing look, but gradually her smiles came easier, and they began to talk beyond simple pleasantries. He learned that her father had been a professor of literature at a small college, that her mother had died when Catherine was 12, that she had a younger brother studying medicine in Philadelphia. She learned that Jack had come west at 18 after his parents' farm in Ohio failed, that he had worked a dozen different jobs before finding his place on the cattle ranches of Texas, that he had a way with horses that bordered on magical. "Why do you not have your own spread?" Catherine asked him one September afternoon as they sat on the bench outside the newspaper office. She had been setting type all day and had ink on her fingers, which she kept absently trying to wipe off on her apron. Jack leaned back, considering the question. "Never seemed like the right time, I suppose. Ranch work pays decent, but saving up enough for land and cattle and everything else you need takes years. And I guess I always figured I would know when the time was right." "And now?" Catherine asked, turning to look at him directly. Their eyes met, and Jack felt that same jolt of recognition he had experienced the first day they met. "Now I am starting to think the time might be coming sooner than I expected." Catherine's cheeks colored slightly, but she did not look away. "That sounds like a wise conclusion, Mr. Malone." "Jack," he said softly, "I wish you would call me Jack." "Then you must call me Catherine," she replied, and the formality between them shifted into something warmer, something that felt like the beginning of real intimacy. Their courtship, if it could be called that, proceeded slowly by necessity. Jack had his work at the Rockingham and Catherine had her responsibilities at the newspaper, but they found time for each other. Jack would ride into town on Sunday afternoons, and they would walk together along the creek that ran behind the church, talking about everything and nothing. Catherine told him about the books she loved, the places she dreamed of seeing. Jack told her about the wild beauty of the open range, the satisfaction of honest work, the way a sunset could make you believe in something bigger than yourself. "Do you miss St. Louis?" Jack asked one October afternoon as they sat by the creek, watching the water flow past. The cottonwood trees were turning gold and the air had finally cooled from the brutal summer heat. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "I miss my father," she said finally. "I miss the life we had together, but St. Louis itself," she shook her head. "It never felt like home, not really. There were too many rules, too many expectations about who I should be and how I should behave. Here, people judge you by what you do, not what your bloodline is or how much money your family has." "Is that why you came west?" Jack asked. "To escape those expectations?" "Partly," Catherine admitted, "but also because I wanted to do something that mattered. In St. Louis, my options were to marry well or become a governess or perhaps a teacher at a girls' school. The newspaper offers me a chance to actually shape the world, even if it is just this small corner of Texas." Jack reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar between them over the past weeks. "For what it is worth, I think you are shaping it admirably." She squeezed his hand in return, her green eyes soft. "That means more to me than you might realize, Jack." The trouble started again in late October. Carson and his friends had not forgotten their humiliation, and they began spreading ugly rumors about Catherine around town. They suggested she was too forward, too opinionated, not respectable for a proper lady. Some of the more conservative townspeople began to give her the cold shoulder, and Jack noticed the strain it put on her, even though she tried to hide it. "Let me handle this," Jack said when Catherine told him about the latest incident where Mrs. Pritchard had actually crossed the street to avoid speaking to her. "I can make it clear that they need to stop." "No," Catherine said firmly. They were in the newspaper office, the printing press silent for once. "I will not have you fighting my battles for me, Jack. I faced those men down once, and I can face down their small-minded gossip as well." "I am not saying you cannot handle it," Jack said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I am saying you should not have to. Let me help." Catherine's expression softened. She crossed the room and placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "I know you want to protect me, and I love you for it." The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud, though Jack had known the truth of it for weeks now. He covered her hand with his own. "I love you too," he said quietly, "which is exactly why I cannot stand by and watch people treat you poorly." "Then be with me," Catherine said simply. "Stand beside me as you are doing now. That is all the help I need." Jack pulled her close, and she came willingly into his arms. They stood there in the office, holding each other as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Jack breathed in the scent of her hair, printer's ink and lavender soap, and felt his heart settle into certainty. "Marry me," he said into her hair. Catherine pulled back to look up at him, her eyes wide. "What? Marry me," Jack repeated, louder this time, more confident. "I know I do not have much to offer yet. I am still saving for my own place, and it might be another year before I can afford land. But I love you, Catherine. I loved you from the moment I saw you standing tall with that Winchester, refusing to back down. I want to spend the rest of my life standing beside you, facing whatever comes." Tears welled up in Catherine's eyes, but she was smiling. "You foolish, wonderful man. Do you really think I care about land or money? I came west with almost nothing, and I have never been happier." She cupped his face in her ink-stained hands. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Jack kissed her then, properly and thoroughly, and Catherine kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like fools. "I should speak to your uncle," Jack said. "Do this properly." "Uncle Silas already knows how I feel about you," Catherine said, laughing. "He told me last week that if you did not propose soon, he was going to do it on your behalf just to end the suspense." Silas did indeed give his blessing, along with a firm handshake and a warning that he expected Jack to treat his niece with the respect and love she deserved. Jack assured him that he would spend every day of his life trying to be worthy of her. They were married in November in the small church at the edge of town. Catherine wore a simple cream-colored dress that she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Jack wore his best suit, purchased specially for the occasion, and polished his boots until they gleamed. Half the town turned out for the ceremony, including Marcus from the Rockingham Ranch and most of the other hands. Even Sheriff Thomas came, despite his arthritis and general reluctance to socialize. As Jack slid the gold band onto Catherine's finger, promising to love and cherish her for all his days, he marveled at how much his life had changed in just 3 months. He had been drifting before, working but not building toward anything in particular. Now he had a purpose, a partner, a future that stretched out bright with possibility. They spent their wedding night in the small house behind the newspaper office that Silas had given them as a wedding present. It was modest, just 3 rooms, but it was theirs. Catherine had hung curtains in the windows and placed wildflowers in a jar on the table. Jack carried her over the threshold, making her laugh, and they spent the evening learning each other in ways both tender and passionate, building the foundation of their intimate life together. In the months that followed, Jack worked harder than he ever had before. He took on extra jobs whenever he could, breaking horses for neighboring ranches, guiding hunting parties into the hill country, even helping with construction when the town decided to build a new schoolhouse. Every dollar he earned went into their savings, building toward the dream of their own ranch. Catherine continued her work at the newspaper, but she also began writing more ambitious pieces. She corresponded with editors at larger papers in Austin and San Antonio. and some of her articles about life on the frontier were picked up and reprinted. Her writing was honest and vivid, capturing both the hardship and the beauty of the West, and it brought attention to redemption in positive ways. The rumors about her died down, partly because she and Jack presented such a united front, but mostly because Catherine simply outlasted the gossips. She continued to be herself, helping where help was needed, speaking her mind when justice demanded it, and gradually even the most stubborn townspeople had to admit that she was an asset to their community. Spring came, and with it the first real test of their marriage. Jack had saved almost enough money to make a down payment on a piece of land he had his eye on, a good spread with water and grazing, when Catherine came to him with news. "I am with child," she said one evening as they sat at their small table, eating the stew she had made for dinner. Jack's fork clattered to his plate. "You are certain?" Dr. Morrison confirmed it this afternoon, Catherine said. Her face was difficult to read, a mixture of joy and anxiety. "The baby will come in October, he thinks." Jack was around the table in an instant, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands. "Catherine, that is wonderful. That is the best news I have ever heard. But the ranch," she said, worry creeping into her voice. "The money you have been saving." "If we have a child to care for, the ranch can wait," Jack interrupted firmly. "What matters is you and the baby. We will make it work, Catherine. We always do." She smiled then, a radiant expression that made her glow. "We are going to be parents, Jack." "We are," he agreed, feeling a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly unmanned him. "And our child is going to have the best mother anyone could ask for." The pregnancy was not easy. Catherine suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and by summer she was uncomfortable in the Texas heat. But she never complained, and she continued working at the newspaper until she was too far along to manage the printing press safely. Jack fussed over her constantly, making sure she rested, bringing her cold water from the well, rubbing her feet when they ached. Catherine teased him about being overprotective, but he could see she appreciated his attention. They spent the long summer evenings planning for their child, discussing names and dreams and all the things they would teach their son or daughter. "I want our children to know they can be anything," Catherine said one night as they lay in bed, Jack's hand resting on her swollen belly. "That who they are matters more than what society expects them to be." "They will know," Jack promised. "With you as their mother, how could they not?" The baby came early on a stormy night in late September. Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Henderson, who served as the town's midwife, attended Catherine while Jack paced in the front room, listening to her cries and feeling utterly helpless. It was the longest night of his life. But when dawn broke and the rain finally stopped, he heard a new sound, the wail of an infant, strong and loud. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the bedroom, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Malone," she said, "and your wife is asking for you." Jack entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Catherine lay propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face exhausted, but she had never looked more beautiful. In her arms she held a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and when Jack approached, she pulled the blanket back to reveal their son. He was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that squinted up at his parents. Jack reached out with one finger to touch the baby's cheek, marveling at the softness. "Hello, little man," Jack whispered. "I am your papa." "We should name him Thomas," Catherine said softly. "After my father." "Thomas Malone," Jack said, testing the name. "It sounds right. It sounds perfect." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Catherine shifted so he could put his arm around her. Together they looked down at their son, this small person they had created, and Jack felt his world reorient itself around this new center. "We made him," Catherine said wonderingly. "Jack, we made a whole person." "We did," Jack agreed, his voice thick. "And we are going to give him the best life we can." Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged. Jack marveled at how quickly he learned to love this tiny human, how nothing else seemed to matter quite as much. He still worked at the Rocking M, but he arranged his schedule so he could be home more, helping Catherine with the baby and the household chores. The ranch dream did not die, but it transformed. It became less about Jack's pride or ambition, and more about building something lasting for Thomas, for the family they were creating together. Jack started talking to Marcus about possibly buying into the Rocking M as a partner, a different path than owning his own spread, but one that might work better for their growing family. Marcus, who had come to respect Jack over the years, agreed to consider it. "You are one of the best hands I have ever had, Malone, and you are smart about cattle and land. A partnership could benefit us both." They were working out the details of the arrangement when trouble came from an unexpected direction. A group of cattle rustlers had been operating in the area, hitting ranches across 3 counties. In February, they struck the Rocking M, making off with nearly 200 head of cattle in the middle of the night. Marcus was devastated. It was a loss he could barely afford, and it put the entire ranch in jeopardy. If they could not recover those cattle, he might have to sell out to one of the larger operations that were starting to dominate the region. Jack organized a posse, 6 experienced riders who knew the country. "We will find them," he promised Marcus, "and we will bring back what is ours." Catherine kissed him goodbye at dawn, Thomas in her arms. "Be careful," she said, worry evident in her eyes. "Come back to us." "Always," Jack promised, touching her cheek. "I will always come back to you." The pursuit took them deep into the rough country south of Redemption, following tracks and asking questions at every settlement they passed. It took 5 days of hard riding, but they finally caught up with the rustlers at an abandoned homestead near the border. The confrontation was tense. The rustlers were desperate men, and they were armed. But Jack had the law on his side and more men who knew how to handle themselves. After a standoff that lasted nearly an hour, with Jack negotiating on behalf of the posse, the rustlers finally surrendered without shots being fired. They recovered not just the Rocking M cattle, but stock from 2 other ranches as well. The rustlers were turned over to the federal marshal, and Jack led the herd back home, arriving in Redemption to a hero's welcome. Catherine ran out to meet him, Thomas bouncing on her hip, and Jack dismounted to sweep them both into his arms. "I am home," he said simply, "and I am never leaving you for that long again." Marcus was so grateful that he agreed to make Jack a full partner in the Rocking M, with a percentage of ownership and a say in all decisions. It was more than Jack had dared hope for, a security and future beyond what he could have built alone. "You earned this," Marcus said as they signed the partnership papers, "and I am proud to have you as a partner, not just a hand." Life settled into a good rhythm after that. Jack worked the ranch alongside Marcus and the other hands, but he made sure to be home every night for dinner with his family. Catherine returned to occasional writing for the newspaper, though her primary focus was on Thomas, who grew with astonishing speed. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything, a curious and fearless child who reminded Jack of his mother every day. They celebrated with a small party, just family and close friends. As Jack watched Catherine laugh with Mrs. Henderson while Thomas demolished a piece of cake with his hands, he felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting. Not just a place, but a purpose. Not just a job, but a calling. Not just a woman, but a partner who made him better than he could ever be alone. 2 years later, Catherine gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Grace. She was smaller than Thomas had been, with her mother's red hair and her father's gray eyes. Jack held her for the first time and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "How do you love them so much?" he asked Catherine one night as they watched their children sleep, Thomas in his small bed and Grace in her cradle. "How is there room for all this feeling?" "Love is not limited by space," Catherine said, leaning against him. "It grows to fit whatever we need it to fit, and we have so much to love, Jack. We are very lucky." "We are," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. "I am the luckiest man in Texas." The years passed in a blur of seasons and small moments. Thomas learned to ride, sitting in front of Jack on Biscuit and whooping with delight as they cantered across the range. Grace proved to have her mother's way with words, telling elaborate stories before she was even 4 years old. The Rocking M prospered under Jack and Marcus's partnership, becoming one of the most respected ranches in the region. Catherine's writing gained wider recognition. She published a series of articles about frontier women that were eventually collected into a book, one of the first of its kind. It sold modestly but steadily, and brought her correspondence from women all over the country who saw their own experiences reflected in her words. "I never imagined this," Catherine said one evening as she showed Jack a letter from a woman in Oregon Territory. "That my words could reach so far, could matter to people I will never meet." "You have always mattered," Jack said firmly. "From the very first day when you stood up for yourself with that rifle, you showed everyone that you were someone to be reckoned with. I am just glad the rest of the world is finally catching up." They talked sometimes about that first day, about the moment they met. It had become a story they told their children, a tale of how Papa saw Mama defend herself and knew right away that she was special. "Did you really know you would marry her?" Thomas asked when he was 10, skeptical in the way of children who think they understand the world. "I did," Jack said honestly. "I knew she was the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I had ever seen. And I knew that if I could somehow convince her to give me a chance, I would spend every day trying to be worthy of her." "And did you convince her?" Grace asked, snuggling closer to her father. "Eventually," Jack said, winking at Catherine across the room, "though it took some doing." "Your mother has always been particular about who she keeps company with." "I am particular," Catherine agreed, coming to sit with them. "Which is why I chose your father, because he saw me as a partner, not a prize, because he respected my strength instead of fearing it. And because he makes me laugh, even on the hardest days." When Thomas was 15 and Grace was 13, Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had been like a father to Jack, and the loss hit him hard. But Marcus had left his portion of the ranch to Jack and Catherine, making them sole owners. It was both an honor and a responsibility that Jack took seriously. "He believed in you," Catherine said as they read through Marcus's will. "He trusted you to carry on what he built." "We will," Jack promised. "Together, we will make sure this place thrives for our children and their children after them." They renamed the ranch the Double M for Malone and Marcus, a tribute to the partnership that had made it all possible. Under their management, it continued to grow and adapt to the changing times. When barbed wire became common, Jack was one of the first ranchers in the area to implement it thoughtfully, protecting the land while still maintaining open ranges. When the railroad pushed through 10 miles north of Redemption, Jack negotiated favorable shipping rates that benefited not just the Double M but all the smaller ranchers in the region. Catherine's work evolved as well. She became increasingly involved in advocating for women's rights, using her platform at the newspaper to push for legal reforms and social change. She corresponded with suffragists in the East and helped organize Texas women to petition for property rights and voting rights. It was not always popular work, but Jack supported her fully, just as he had promised on that October afternoon when she first told him she was pregnant with Thomas. Their children grew into fine young adults. Thomas showed a natural talent for ranching, with an instinct for cattle and land that rivaled his father's. Grace inherited her mother's writing gift and her father's sense of justice, and at 18 she left for college in Austin to study law, one of only a handful of women in her program. "I am so proud of them," Catherine said one evening as she and Jack sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. They were in their 50s now, their hair touched with gray, but Jack still thought Catherine was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "They are going to change the world, Jack. They learned from the best," Jack said, taking her hand. "You taught them that who they are matters more than what anyone expects them to be, just like you promised you would." Catherine squeezed his hand, and they sat in comfortable silence as the day faded into dusk. Somewhere in the house behind them, Thomas was doing the accounts for the ranch. Grace would be arriving home next week for the summer, full of stories about her studies and plans for the future. "You ever regret it?" Catherine asked suddenly. "Coming to my rescue that day, taking on a wife who would not be content to just keep house and raise babies?" Jack turned to look at her fully, his gray eyes serious. "Catherine Malone, in all the years we have been together, I have never regretted a single moment. You have made my life richer and fuller and more meaningful than I ever imagined it could be. You challenged me to be better, to think bigger, to care more deeply. How could I ever regret that?" Tears glistened in Catherine's eyes, but she was smiling. "You silver-tongued devil, even after all these years, you still know exactly what to say." "I just tell the truth," Jack said, leaning over to kiss her. "I love you, Catherine. I loved you from the moment I saw you standing tall with that Winchester, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Catherine said against his lips. "My partner, my best friend. The man who saw me as I truly was and loved me anyway." They kissed again, long and sweet, as the Texas sky darkened above them and the first stars began to appear. Inside, the lamps were lit, casting warm light through the windows. The Double M Ranch spread out around them, thousands of acres of good land that they had built together, worked together, made prosperous together. In the years that followed, they watched with pride as Thomas married a smart young woman from a neighboring ranch and began to take over more of the day-to-day operations of the Double M. Grace finished her law degree and returned to Texas to open a practice in Austin, specializing in women's and family law. She fought cases that changed legislation and helped countless women escape bad situations or protect their rights. Jack and Catherine became grandparents, first when Thomas and his wife welcomed twin boys, and later when Grace married a fellow lawyer and had a daughter of her own. They doted on their grandchildren, teaching them to ride and rope, to read and think critically, to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the Double M for a celebration. Catherine wore a new dress in deep green that matched her eyes, and Jack wore his best suit. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, along with half the town of Redemption, which had grown considerably over the decades. Silas, elderly now but still sharp as ever, stood to give a toast. 30 years ago, my niece arrived in Redemption and immediately had to defend herself from some foolish men who did not know how to respect a woman. And a certain cowboy saw her standing there with her rifle and had the good sense to recognize quality when he saw it. Their love story has been one of partnership and respect, of building something meaningful together. They have shown all of us what a good marriage looks like. To Jack and Catherine, the crowd echoed the toast, and Jack pulled Catherine close, kissing her soundly to applause and cheers. When they broke apart, both were laughing. 30 years, Catherine marveled. "Where did the time go into building this?" Jack said, gesturing at their family, their friends, the ranch surrounding them. "Into creating a life worth living, and I would not change a single moment of it." As the party continued around them, music and laughter filling the evening air, Catherine rested her head on Jack's shoulder and thought about that dusty afternoon in August 1878, when she had stepped off a wagon in Redemption with nothing but her father's rifle and a determination to make a new life for herself. She had never imagined finding love, especially not love like this, fierce and tender and enduring. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, his arm tightening around her waist. "About how I came west looking for freedom and purpose," Catherine said. "And I found that, but I also found something I was not even searching for. I found a partner who made everything better. I found you." "I am the one who got lucky," Jack said. "I was drifting until the day I met you. You gave me direction, gave me something worth working for beyond just survival. You made me want to be a better man." "You were always a good man," Catherine corrected gently. "You just needed the right reason to settle down and build something lasting. We found that reason in each other." They danced together as the evening wore on, moving slowly to the music while their family watched with fondness. Thomas danced with his wife, the twins playing nearby with other children. Grace swayed with her husband, her hand resting on her belly where another grandchild grew. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility. As the years continued to pass, Jack and Catherine settled more into the role of elders, offering wisdom and guidance but letting the younger generation take the reins. Thomas proved to be an excellent rancher, innovative and fair, beloved by the hands who worked for him. Grace's legal practice flourished, and she became known throughout Texas as a fierce advocate for justice. Jack and Catherine spent their days in quiet contentment, sitting on the porch and watching the land they loved, visiting with grandchildren who adored them, writing letters and reading books, and simply enjoying each other's company. They had earned their rest, had built something that would outlast them, had loved fully and completely. On a warm spring morning when Jack was 72 and Catherine was 70, they sat together on that same porch, holding hands as they had done for nearly 45 years of marriage. The ranch was alive with activity, cattle lowing in the distance, horses whinnying in the corral, the sounds of life continuing around them. "I have been thinking," Catherine said, breaking the comfortable silence, "about that day we met. About how different my life would have been if you had not been sitting in that saloon, if you had not come to my aid." "I would have found you eventually," Jack said with certainty. "A woman like you could not stay hidden for long. You shine too brightly." Catherine laughed, the sound still clear and youthful despite the years. "You are still a charmer, Jack Malone. After all this time, you still make me feel like that young woman with a rifle, fierce and unafraid." "You are still that woman," Jack said seriously. "You have never stopped being fierce. You have never stopped standing up for what matters. That is who you are, Catherine, and it is one of the 1,000 reasons I love you." She turned to kiss him, soft and sweet, a kiss that held decades of love and partnership and shared life. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "I love you too," Catherine said. "Thank you for seeing me all those years ago. Thank you for recognizing that my strength was not something to fear or tame, but something to celebrate." "Thank you for giving me a chance," Jack replied. "Thank you for building this life with me. For our children, our grandchildren, everything we have created together. You are my greatest adventure, Catherine. You always have been." They sat together as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds in a wild and unforgiving land. They had built an empire from nothing, raised a family that would carry on their values, loved each other through every trial and triumph. Their story had started with a crack of a rifle and a moment of recognition, and it had grown into something legendary, a love that had shaped not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. In the evenings, when their great-grandchildren visited and begged for stories, Jack and Catherine would tell them about the old days, about Texas in the late 1800s when everything was still being built and anything seemed possible. They would tell about cattle drives and drought years, about building the Double M and fighting for justice. But the story the children loved most was the simplest one. How Grandpa Jack saw Grandma Catherine defending herself with a rifle and knew right then that she would be his wife someday. And was she? The youngest great-grandchild would ask, even though they all knew the answer. "She was," Jack would confirm, pulling Catherine close. "She is still my wife today, and she will be my wife forever." Because when you find the right person, the person who makes you better and stronger and more yourself than you ever thought possible, you hold on tight and you never let go. "Never let go," Catherine would echo, kissing his weathered cheek. "Through everything, we held on to each other." And that made all the difference. As the sun set on another beautiful day at the Double M Ranch, Jack and Catherine Malone sat surrounded by the family they had built and the legacy they had created, their hands still entwined just as they had been on that November day in 1878 when they pledged their lives to each other. They had lived fully, loved completely, and left the world better than they found it. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. The story of the cowboy who saw a woman defend her honor with a rifle and knew she would be his wife had become the foundation of a dynasty, proof that true partnership and mutual respect could build something that lasted not just years but generations. Their love had been tested by time and hardship, by change and challenge, and it had emerged stronger every time. They had shown everyone who knew them what marriage could be at its best, a union of equals, a partnership of souls, a love that enriched rather than diminished. And on quiet evenings, when it was just the two of them on the porch watching the stars come out over the Texas plains, they would sometimes look at each other and marvel at how lucky they had been to find each other in that dusty frontier town all those years ago. Catherine had come west looking for freedom, and Jack had been adrift looking for purpose. Together, they had found everything they needed and more, building a love story that would be told for generations to come, a testament to the power of seeing someone truly and loving them exactly as they are. Their legacy lived on in the Double M Ranch, in the laws Grace had helped change, in the values Thomas passed down to his children, in every person whose life they had touched with their kindness, and their conviction that people deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. But most of all, their legacy lived in the simple truth that real love, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond, is built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and the courage to stand beside your partner through everything life brings. Jack Malone had watched Catherine Hartley defend her honor with a rifle on a hot August day in 1878, and he had known in that moment that she was extraordinary. He had spent the next 45 years proving himself worthy of her, and she had spent those same years showing him that he had always been worthy, that together they could accomplish anything. It was a love story for the ages, born in the dust and heat of the Texas frontier and growing into something timeless, something that reminded everyone who heard it that true love was not about finding someone to complete you, but about finding someone who inspired you to be complete yourself while standing beside them as an equal partner in all things. And so their story ended where it began, with two people who recognized in each other something rare and precious, who chose each other every day for decades, who built a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. The cowboy and the woman with the rifle, partners until the very end, their love a beacon for all who came after them.